I'm thinking then on a societal level that all of this activity, whether you're demonstrating care for things that aren't being cared about, whether you're simulating new possibilities, whether you're just playfully celebrating the non-utility value of humans, that these are all necessarily anti-fascist activities.
I'm glad you used that phrase. No, fascism is a word that we really ought to be using quite regularly now. Um, I'm giving a talk tonight, and one of the things that I want to say is that we've got to stop using these phrases far-right authoritarian politics. That does exist, but actually fascism is what we're really talking about. There's and using the term far-right politics kind of mutes the reality, because it says, oh, this is just part of the game of politics. There's left and there's right, and we argue about things, and we come to a consensus eventually. Um, Fascism has no interest whatsoever in coming to a consensus. Fascism wants to absolutely dominate. It's not a democratic process. And of course, fascism always uses the processes of democracy in order to destroy democracy. So it destroys it, and then that's the end of democracy. You don't play that game any longer after that. There's a great writer, a Turkish writer called Ece Temelkaran, who wrote a beautiful book about 8 years ago called How to Lose a Country. And it's sort of the story of how Turkey slid into fascism. And she says, I think it's in that book, she says, the reason nobody calls it fascism is because if you call it that, you have to do something about it. You know, if you call it far-right politics, then it's just part of the rich display of human
Right, you could
activity.
debate with it.
Yes. If you call it fascism, you have to bloody get off your arse and do something about it. Or ass, I should say, since I'm talking to
Yeah.
an American.
Well, we're global. But the doing art feels like one of the great, uh, uh, ways of doing something about fascism, because the way we're talking about art now is it defies the inevitable, that it creates wiggle room. You know, it's like art, the way we're talking about it is one big what if. And what
Yes,
if is
yes,
the enemy of fascism?
yes, yes, yes. That's a beautiful sentence. I hope you've written that down somewhere.
Well, we recorded it.
No, that's really good. In fact, one of the things I was thinking about the other day, which I think is related to this, is um, the interesting fact that people, fascists, don't have very good senses of humor. Um, they don't make jokes, or if they do, the only kind of jokes they seem to make are sort of based on Schadenfreude. They're based on somebody else
It's
having a
humiliation.
bad time.
Yeah.
Humiliation, yes. I mean, Trump is a classic example of that kind of humor. Or I remember reading once about Mithridates Eupator, the Mesopotamian, I guess, emperor, who was only recorded laughing once in his life when he saw his ass eating thistles. That was the only thing he thought was funny in his life, seeing some other creature in pain. Um, but it's interesting that if you look at comedians, there are very few right-wing comedians. I mean,
Right.
I I would love to know whether there's any statistical evidence for that, but I don't. Every comedian we see on in England, with I think two exceptions that I can think of, they're essentially sort of left of centre progressives, liberals, if you like. It doesn't make them. I'm not saying that therefore they're much better people, but it's interesting to me that humour, which is really the ability to enjoy being surprised by a different perspective.
Mm.
That's what humour comes down to, doesn't it? You're led into a context where you expect something or other to happen, and then something else happens. So often that's what jokes are, that you realize, oh my gosh, yes, if you look at it from that angle, that's very funny. Um, but I think that fascists don't want to look at it from another angle. They don't want to be surprised by another point of view. Um, I just read a fantastic book, incredibly long, 980 pages long.
Sounds like what? It's not Dawn of Everything, is it?
No, that's
Mm.
do you mean the Graeber book?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
I
another
love that
fact.
book.
Yeah.
No, this is a novel.
Oh,
It's a novel, and it's written from the point of view of an SS um, an SS officer through the Second World War. So he sees all the various horrors and ends up in a room with Hitler. Um, but the most interesting thing about the depiction of this person is his inability to have any easy way of shifting perspective.
the kindly ones.
The Kindly Ones, that's the book.
Yes.
Well done. Well done. That's exactly the book. It was had either very bad reviews or very good reviews. They're always interesting, those books. Um, but what's fascinated me was being inside of a mind that viewed uncertainty as the biggest danger, that was terrified of uncertainty. And one of the things I think I say in the book, or I've said somewhere anyway,
You say, if we don't learn to make a balance between control and surrender, if we only know how to control, we end up in a world shrunken to the bits that we can still control. The raw, wild world develops and leaves us behind, playing solitaire on our phones.
that was good, wasn't it?